Windbound. Has anyone heard of Windbound? Maybe you have, but its release slid under your radar. It's an indie title that promotes itself as being like a certain popular Zelda game. Oh, it's just a little known game called Bloody Wind Waker. While I hate to compare games all the time, in this case I feel it's really important to make a correction. Windbound does in fact have huge inspiration from Wind Waker. Sailing around to islands, check. Wind direction affecting sailing, check. Cel-shaded looking designs, check. Even something as recognizable as the mumble-talking soundbite voices of characters and unique music for each individual enemy. But as I already said, I have to correct the comparison. While yes, all these things invoke Wind Waker immediately, Windbound is nothing like it. This is where a little bit of false marketing and misleading players comes in. It certainly fooled me. Windbound is a survival sim. That's all it is. There isn't any RPG story-based dungeon crawling Zelda-ness. I would have normally steered clear from these randomly generated survival type games. But you tell me it's like Wind Waker, and I of course would fall for any misleading advertising. I knew there were survival elements in the game. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that there was no story-based exploration or interaction. Windbound feels as hollow as something like, well, looky here, Stranded Deep. Never heard of it? Well, think of it like a Raft clone. What's not a coincidence about this? Deep Silver, the people who made this game, also made Stranded Deep. Put the two games on a board together and just imagine the execs trying to make the game twice, but try to dress it up as something else. That's unfortunately how I feel about Windbound. Windbound isn't a bad game. It's not even a terrible game. It's just basically a bit lazy and not at all the game most people were expecting. Windbound follows the story of a girl named Kara. Through an introduction with no dialogue or narration, we don't really know exactly what's going on. I can only assume Kara and her tribe were sailing somewhere and then a giant sea creature attacks her, separating her from the tribe, destroying her boat and washing her up on a strange shore. Now you begin your standard survival gameplay. Use what little you start with to be able to forage and harvest materials off an island. Managing your health and hunger bars. Making spears and slingshots to use as rudimentary weapons to begin with in order to protect yourself or hunt smaller animals for meat. Making a fire to cook the meat and keeping the fire lit with resources. Each island having different resources depending on their terrain or environment. Also having weak little critters to kill for food or the larger predators that you'll have to be careful of because they can be quite deadly. Animals in this game have a rather cute gimmick to them. Each of them make different musical noises. Little musical differences that add layers to the background music. Get close to a particular critter and the music changes for that animal. Even if you can't always see them, this means you can hear them instead to try work out where they are. Music and sounds play a big part in informing you of when you are unseen, have been spotted by predators, or are under attack, or if something is stalking you. Collectible currencies, health and stamina upgrades, as well as Nautilus shrines also give off slight sounds for you to be able to find them. When you do have the right weaponry and are confident enough, you can tackle the tougher animals on these islands. Making a bow will be a great way to attack from range, or reinforcing a stick spear into a bone spear will do a bit more damage than just a stick. Every beast will have a certain way that they will attack you and means you need to know how to dodge away when they attack. Large bull-like gore horns will charge at you or kick their back legs at you. You have to use your stamina to attack as well as having some left to dodge. Should things get hairy, you can always retreat. Running away with your stamina bar depleting your hunger meter further should you run while exhausted. Eating the right food will restore both health and stamina bars if you get hurt. All these threats and such contributing factors that add to all the survival mechanics present. It's the same old story. Find new materials to unlock new crafting and recipes, which in turn allow you to collect other materials. For example, needing the jaw of a large beast to make an axe, which will then allow you to cut down trees, unlocking wood. Only late game islands spawning particular enemies or resources to be able to craft higher tier gear, like bags to carry more items, stronger weapons, and even a few pieces of clothing. Each island has finite resources. Well, I think that's what I found it to be like. Maybe some things like berries or grass regrows, but most important things like trees, they don't. So what are our options then? Well, we have to go to another island, which means we need a boat. Kara can swim for a little bit, but will quickly drown when she loses stamina. Instead, after finding a magical paddle/rudder, you need to craft a canoe out of grass. This small little boat will allow you to paddle to the next island in order to find more grass and rocks, collecting enough to build a mast to sail your way around the map. Sailing in this game at least tries to expand upon the basic mechanics of Wind Waker. The wind direction is random, and you have to move your sails accordingly to catch the wind or tack across it. Reading the wind and sailing your boat can be a little tricky. It's very hard to judge and control your speed correctly and slow down enough to not beach your boat or crash it into rocks. Boats have durability, and the more you smash them or see critters attack them, they get damaged. So it's vital to get to grips with the sailing. First, you might need an anchor so your boat won't float away. Next would be pushing out into open water to try steer it off the shore. You can raise your sail to different heights to control how slow or fast you want to go. If you are sailing with the wind at your back, you can loosen your sails to catch it, or if you are sailing across or into the wind, tighten the sails. There are slight variances that fall in offset directions, but you can tell if you have the right angled sail just by whether or not you are moving or the sail fluffs up with wind. Sailing the sea can be dangerous, with reefs to watch out for, along with lobsters or even sharks that can attack your boat or even destroy it completely. You have to keep an eye on things and be on alert at all times, no matter how relaxing sailing can be. Waves can get pretty high and rough, so it's best not to sail at full sail, otherwise you're going to flip or nosedive straight into the drink. You can stabilize your rig with some side hulls to balance it out. You can put some defensive spikes or armor on the sides to protect it. Plus, you can build decks, which I think can even add height or length depending on where you place them. On console, it was a little bit finicky and restricted with placement, so I accidentally crafted in the wrong places and ended up with a wonky, lopsided boat. There also doesn't seem to be many craftables for it. You can make storage on the boat, put a fire or kiln for easy access on it, but there isn't anything like shelter or furniture. The one thing I seem to notice more than anything about your boat's construction, well, it doesn't seem to alter the physics of it as much as I would have liked. The boat never really got any more stable with putting more hulls on it, even adding a second sail never felt like it made me sail faster either. Sharks didn't seem to bother me at all, never once having come close to attacking me, meaning I was never in any real danger out on the sea. The only problem was getting a figurehead that abnormally alters your speed, allowing you to sail ridiculously fast and jump waves into the air, which, with how wonky the boat physics acts, usually meant I got stuck in a cycle of nosediving or flipping the raft over and over. In order to reach new islands that you can plunder resources off in order to survive, we have to sail to the next chapter. On some larger islands, you can find these towers. Climbing to the top, you can activate these Nautilus shrines. Unlock 3, and they will open the path to the crossing. Inside the crossing is where the tale of the sea monsters gets told. Hundreds of years of history between man and Nautilus, unveiling new details each time you come back. The crossing acts like these little trials, having more dangerous straits to sail through, more rocks or sharks to avoid within. As you sail, the massive swells push you towards the way out. Before leaving though, you can spend found currency called sea shards, which unlock blessings. You have to have at least 500 shards to pick one of 2 blessings that you can then equip within this place. They offer strong weapons or buffs to attributes that can really help you out. Unfortunately for me, I was like 50 shards off my first upgrade and you can't re-pick them at the next crossing. They rotate to random selections and once you miss one, it's unavailable to get again for this playthrough. Which really sucked because the first one was a stamina buff. I could have really done with that one. Windbound basically revolves around the system of scavenge for resources to make a fire, make new weapons and tools if your old ones break, hammers, axes and spears having durability of course, hunt animals in order to have food, as food goes bad the longer you keep it, cook food at fire, eat it, and then prepare to scout the island. Fighting new deadly beasts to be able to scavenge new resources off them in order to unlock new gear. Unlock currency and shrines to open up the next chapter and islands, progressing the game. Finding better quality resources to make new boats or strengthen the one you already have. Having deadly creatures on some islands is where the danger and survival mechanics of the game really matter. In standard difficulty, if you die, you will spawn at the start of the chapter, losing everything you aren't holding and also losing your boat. This is a very misplaced and punishing difficulty that baffles me as to why it was made to be standard. What doesn't particularly work about it is that you don't have a bed you can respawn at or a chest to keep all your important stuff safe. Only what's in your pockets gets saved, but it basically just resets a whole lot of progress for that chapter. At least it doesn't put you all the way back to the first chapter. That would be a nightmare. I think this is the worst way they could have added difficulty to the game. I tried both modes and the core game doesn't feel like it generally changes. The gameplay and core difficulty actually detracts a lot from the game's merits, which would be the survival and exploration, as well as the general feeling of freedom when casually sailing the open seas. Instead, the game plays a bit more stressfully. You are mindlessly rushing to scavenge islands in order to get everything you need before you get too hungry. Or if your inventory is full, you have to keep dumping items you think you don't need, only to need them later on to start a fire to be able to cook with, having sailed to an island that apparently doesn't have any grass left to harvest. Exhausting resources, forcing you to abandon islands that you might otherwise want to rest at or just craft in peace. Sailing aimlessly to unknown shores that fail to spawn common animals that you need for one stupid material to craft some new thing. Designating a shipbuilding island specifically for the boat materials it may have. Having to abandon your old boat as dismantling destroys parts and leaves less materials left than it took to craft. Not being able to swap boat parts or replace parts if they get placed where you didn't want them to. The biggest blunder, advertising the game as a relaxing sailing experience with realistic elements of sailing and boatcraft, with tantalizing new islands to leisurely sail to, adventure waiting over the next horizon. When in reality, you feel like you're on eggshells with anxiety, stressing about quickly finding that next island to get food fast. Trying to always keep sailing to a minimum, speeding your way across the water in order to avoid encounters with boat-destroying sharks. Never gaining armors to be a bit more protected when fighting beasts, always leaving you feeling at risk and vulnerable to an unfair death. Having nothing left on a tiny island to collect, no reason to stay, no reason to build up a little camp. Especially as the only thing you can make is a fire. No tents, no shelters, no nothing. It's that fear of having to redo hours of progress that makes this game way less enjoyable than it should have been. It also feels really empty. I fully expected a ton more upgrades that are fairly standard in most survival games. You can't even make a more durable hammer out of the metal you can mine. I only unlocked 2 headpieces that basically did nothing to help me. You don't need to sleep, you don't need to build shelter to protect you or for cover when it rains. There isn't even anything as interesting as the seas being too rough to sail on to stop you from leaving an island. I think Windbound just failed to do what I expected from this type of game. It felt like so much was missing and even missed the mark completely with what it was trying to emulate. It's nowhere near as polished as Wind Waker. There is not enough story or design that you could even compare the two. It's a game that built its base off of an already existing game, Stranded Deep, and even fails to get the same survival gameplay down properly. The sailing could be the biggest gimmick or drawcard, but the urgency and stressful difficulty completely destroyed all the fun of the act. I wouldn't really bother with playing this game if you don't usually go for survival games like Raft. Even if you like those games, Windbound isn't it. A lot of games play a whole lot better, so I'm not sure why you would play an inferior game. It's not Zelda, it's not a good survival game, and it's definitely not worth anything more than $15, not the $40 I wasted on it. It's short, the endgame doesn't feel challenging, challenge and difficulty being two different things, and the last few islands don't differ from those in the previous chapters. There wasn't even boss battles or a final enemy encounter to sail against. Really no reason to have upgraded your boat to prepare for anything coming at the end. The music, while quaint and cute for when it toots along to different sea critters, gets repetitive when the same tune plays for sailing for the entire game. I felt that each chapter should have had new music to accompany it, as well as having much larger and more diverse environments for the islands. The boat physics don't react realistically and can't get altered depending on your boat's layout. The faster you go, the less control you have, and generally just end up underwater or glitch yourself into the air. Slight waves seem to spaz your boat sideways or unbalance it abnormally. It's just a joke. So disappointed with Windbound. Tried to like it, but I was having less and less fun the more I played.